Swift stayed unbeaten on Saturday night in Brooklyn, but it wasn't easy. We're making the rounds here on ESPN.com. Todd Grisham alongside the one and only Brian Campbell. Dan Rafael will join us in just a bit. Danny Garcia beat Lamont Peterson by majority decision on Saturday night. Your thoughts on that outcome?
Look, a very tough fight to score in the end because it was a tale of two fights in many ways and a tale of two performances for Lamont Peterson. Spent the first 6 rounds, circling, boxing, out-slicking. A lot of people thought running. And once he flipped that switch, though, in the second half of the fight, he really put Danny Garcia on his heels, busted up his right eye, swelled it up. He was the fighter coming on, the more confident fighter at the end when the final bell was rung. For my money, these are now 2 out of 3 fights in a row where you could strongly make a case that Danny Garcia lost this fight. I scored this fight for Lamont Peterson. I understand that it was close, though. It could have gone either way. But I think the bigger picture, the bigger question it asked us in the end is Danny Garcia still an elite fighter? Because Peterson put him on his heels. He really brought the fight to him late. I thought he had a case to win it.
Garcia's face looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Peterson looked like he'd just gotten out of the shower.
We only started a little bit earlier, just a miscalculation.
ESPN.com's boxing insider Dan Rafael now with us. What's next for both Garcia and Peterson?
Well, first of all, I scored the fight a draw, and I agree with Brian. It really could have gone either way. But if you had to pick a winner, you'd probably pick Peterson. That said, as far as what's next, because Lamont Peterson lost this fight, even though it was a non-title bout, he was still stripped of his world title belt. So he is up in the air as far as what he'll do next. He said after the fight he'll consider going to 147 pounds. If he does that, there'll be some marquee matchups for him. He's in the stable of Al Heyman, who controls many of the top fighters in the welterweight division, so there's all kinds of attractive matchups for him. Danny Garcia also after the fight said the continuing struggle to try to get down as low as possible to try to make 140, which he hasn't done since he fought Herrera last summer, that he also was probably destined for his next fight at 147 pounds because he admitted that the cutting of the weight was starting to affect his performance. That was the reason why he didn't want to have this fight all the way at 140, why it was in fact a non-title catchweight fight. If he goes to 147 pounds, he'll be in the same boat as Peterson with a lot of possible opponents to pick from the Al Heyman stable. If he decides he wants to stay at 140 for another fight and defend his world titles, he has a mandatory defense due against Viktor Postol, an undefeated, very talented Ukrainian fighter who fought on the undercard and won as part of the step-aside deal that they made with the Garcia camp so Garcia could fight Peterson. But I don't think Danny or his team is going to want any part of Postol. He's not a big name, and he doesn't really bring a lot to the table. If you beat him, you don't get a lot of credit for it. So I think he'll end up vacating the belts. He'll fight at 147, and Postol will wind up fighting for one of the vacated titles.
I think a lot of people wouldn't mind seeing a rematch, but apparently it may not be in the cards. Let's talk about the co-main event now. Peter Quillin and Andy Lee battled to a hard-fought draw. Did the judges get it right, Brian?
For my money, no. I had Quillin winning this fight, 115, 111. I really thought he had done enough at the end. But I'm going to be honest, I don't begrudge anybody who didn't believe that way, who scored it a draw, who maybe even scored it for Lee the other way. And here's the big difference. The second half of that fight, both fighters really left it on the table. That fight could have been a fight where both guys could have stepped up and really taken it. They both left it because they were too tense and they were too patient. There's a CompuBox stat that really stands out here, the fact that 72% of the punches thrown in this fight were power punches. But throughout the rest of the round, you didn't see jabs. You saw almost 2 minutes of boring, excitingly dull action leading up to it, and then fireworks at the end. Quillin, scoring the 2 knockdowns, I thought he was in a position to really come over the top and make this fight his own. He didn't do that. If he's going to settle with the draw, you really can't have a lot to complain about in that sense.
So it was power punches or nothing between Quillin and Lee. Dan, did both of these fighters' stocks go down with the draw on Saturday?
Well, I don't know how you look at the draw because I also thought that Peter Quillin won the fight clearly. I had it 116 to 110. Maybe one round I might have changed, so I would be in agreement with Brian's score. But as far as the stock going up and down, I think Andy's stock may have gone up a little bit. He was the underdog coming into the fight, survived some terrible moments with the 2 knockdowns. I thought he was out in the first round. Really surprised he was able to get through that and took another humongous shot at the end of the first round. And then for whatever reason, Quillin did not jump on him in round 2 to test and see what he still had left. So the fact that Andy could persevere through those very, very difficult moments in the 2 knockdowns, score a knockdown of his own, come on strong enough later in the fight where many people thought that he won the fight, you really can't say his stock went down, and he still keeps his belt. So, he is in a position where he's hung the first blemish of any kind on Peter Quillin's record by giving him a draw. He still has his belt, and he can still go on and make a lot of money in another fight. Peter Quillin, I do think his stock goes down a little bit, even though the weird thing is about it, you think he probably won the fight. I think people are irritated by the fact that he didn't get Lee out of there when he had him so badly hurt, that he didn't make weight which cost him the opportunity to win the title, and the fact that he did appear to fade later in the fight. So if you had to say, I think Lee's stock might have gone up a little bit, and maybe Peters went down a little bit.
In the end, though, 2 pretty good fights and plenty of talking points. That's all we can ask for in the sport of boxing. That's a look back at the PBC in Brooklyn, and that's all the time we've got for this edition of Making the Rounds. For Dan Rafael and the Brian Campbell, I'm Todd Grisham. Keep fighting.